Shalom, people. This is Brother Laos coming at you with another video. And as we enter the last few days of this election season, which is really sort of like a religious holiday to many people, we just wanted to add our voice to what we believe is going on. Many people have different views, so I'm not saying that mine is, something that's going to trump everything that has been said before, and some of the things that I'm about to say will probably echo some things that's been said for a long time, but I just thought it was important for me to speak to you on, my thoughts on this thing that we call voting. I used to be very active in local politics in the ward that I used to live before I moved to where I'm at. At one point in time, I kind of bought into the thesis per se, because no one has ever proved it, that local politics are much more effective than the national politics, and therefore, when I kind of soured a little bit on the national politics, I did get involved in the local politics, and it was a alderman that we in our ward were trying to get out because she had been there for a long time and she hadn't done anything. And I pretty much had soured on national politics as delivering anything substances to us as black people, because that part of the city that I lived in was predominantly black people at the time. It was becoming more and more Hispanic, but we still had quite a few black people there. Make a long story short, it became in the election a statistical tie almost, and they had to have a runoff. And this young guy that I actually called him and talked to him and told him, hey, look, we on this side of town are pushing for you to get in, because the person that we have, she's not doing anything for us. And he said, when I get in office, Mr. Lyles, I want to do this, that, and I said, the only thing I'm asking you to do is I need this and I need that. It was just like, small things, like repaving the roads and cleaning up some vacant lots. That's, and I also get some more police patrol, because the area that I lived at was crime and drugs and even prostitution and other things were, going on. So make a long story short, I went knocking on doors. I said, hey, we got to get this guy in. We got to get this guy in. And, he won in the runoff by the slimmest of margins. So, when he came into office, I guess it was like 3 months later, I tried to call his, the number that he had gave everybody, and kept getting the answering machine. And so one time I called and I said, now that you're in office, it was like maybe like five months later. I said, I really would like to see some of that stuff that we talked about over the phone. If you could see about trying to get it, started, get these roads over here paved over some of this graffiti, get some police patrols, clean up a couple of vacant lots that I mentioned. Nothing that was going to require, I believe $1 million, budget surplus or anything like that. And so one time, after trying to get in contact with him for like maybe 3 times, I left a message and I said, listen, it seems like you're going to go the same way that the person before you went. And I told him, I said, this is really disappointing to me, right? And so my experiment into the political thing ended right there. I dealt with the national, when Clinton was in, and when Bush came along, Al Gore and all that stuff. I even voted for Obama the first time. But after all that, I basically started looking at voting for what it was, because I looked at all the stuff that was going on at each level that I, was involved in. And my wife was, kind of involved too. She grew up as a Democrat, as most of us as Black people do, And so after seeing what it was doing for us nationally, on a national level with the presidential elections, which was little to nothing, and then the local, I washed my hands of it. And I asked the Most High, I asked him to forgive me for putting my hope in a man. The Bible says, cursed is he that trusteth in a man. Not meaning that we can't trust people, but when we put our whole heart, mind, and soul into these political parties, whether it's Republican or Democrat, we are somewhat bringing ourselves into a covenant with these people where we swear our money, our time, our allegiance, our prayers for these different things. And we as Black people, because we are a spiritual people, we bring it up to another level of a spiritual thing, to where we can literally worship these politicians. Remember the pictures from the 1960s into the 1970s, and sometimes even to the 80s, where you were going to Black people homes, and indeed I've seen it myself with my own eyes, or you were going to Black people's home and you will see these pictures. They called it the Trinity. You had Martin Luther King, you had Robert Kennedy, and you had John Kennedy. The Trinity, that our people, literally, along with the white Jesus, these pictures would populate our homes. And because of this, it became deeply ingrained in us, where you was almost birthed into this thing. But today I want to talk about this thing that we call Black voting. And we're gonna start off with the scriptures coming from the book of Isaiah, the 65th chapter, starting at verse 4. We're gonna start reading. And it said, I am sought of them that ask not for me. I am found of them that sought me not. I said, behold me, unto a nation that was not called by my name. I have spread out my hands all the day unto a rebellious people, which walketh in a way that was not good after their own thoughts. A people that provoketh me to anger continually to my face, that sacrifice in gardens and burneth incense upon altars of brick, which remain among the graves and lodge in the mountains, which eat swine's flesh and broth of abominable things in their vessels. I want to go again to the book of Isaiah, the 66th chapter, starting at verse 15. For behold, the master will come with fire, and with his chariots like a whirlwind, to render his anger with fury, and his rebuke with flames of fire. For by fire and by his sword will the master plead with all flesh, and the slain of the master will be many. They that sanctify themselves and purify themselves in the gardens behind one tree in the midst, eating swine's flesh, and the abomination, and the mouse shall be consumed together, saith the master. And I want to use for a thought today, black voting is Chitling's politics. Black voting is Chitling politics. Chitlings are the intestine of swines, an unclean beast according to the Bible. They contain the waste and poison of the beast system. They are of no consequence even to the beast, meaning the stuff going through the intestines. It's chitlins. Totally useless and devoid of any nutritional value and detrimental to his health, even though he is unclean. This is what black men and black women get when we vote in elections today. But how did we get here? And is there a better way? Chitlins. That's what we get as black people. And the thing about chitlins, you can get as much as you want. But it's something about chitlins and our people, even though they know it's unclean, even though they know it's foul, it's got the waste. People develop a fetish for it where it's sort of like when you cut your hand and then you suck the blood, right? And that blood has a certain kind of taste that is kind of sharp, bitter, but you almost get used to it. And you can literally have to, put some people can get there where they just licking it and whatever. Chitlins are sort of like that, where it's got that fetish type taste that you can't eat it all the time, but it'll leave such a taste in some people's mouth, especially us as black people. Not as much as it used to be, but we'll reach out to try to get some whenever people say, I'm getting ready to cook a pot. Well, even when I was not eating clean, I didn't like chitlins. I think I ate them one time. And even with all the pig feet and all the stuff that I used to eat, I didn't really like the chitlins because I was like, I didn't like the smell or none of that. But I can remember, people getting their hot sauce out, getting their mustard, and they like, load it up, and you will see them you're slurping them up or whatever. And even though, like I said, they had no nutritional value, the stuff that was going through the bile, waste or whatever, even the swine, part of it being an unclean beast that it is, even that part of it does not have no nutritional as a whole, but that definitely. But this is what a lot of times that our people said, this is the delicacy, or even those that ate the hog maws, as they testicles, as they said. But we want to see, how do we get here to what I'm saying black voting is chitlin politics. How do we get here? In 1868, the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution was passed, granting on paper, remember that, citizenship to formerly enslaved American black people. The 15th Amendment was passed in 1870, granting on paper, again, just like in 1868, granting on paper the right to vote for black men. We know how that worked out. We're going to talk about that later on. Fast forward to 1964 and 1965, we had the Voting Rights Act, which was passed to remove illegal tests and other schemes used to prevent blacks from voting or states from changing the requirements to vote without a federal review. And in 1966, the 24th Amendment of the Constitution was passed, fully banning the poll tax. That's where you had to literally pay people to give you the right to vote. Also, the Voting Rights Act is renewed every 25 years, for improvements. And another 25, once they do that, then they give it another 25-year extension. It's signed into law. And I think that extension, I could be wrong, but I think that might have been passed. I could be wrong. Another 25 extension was passed during Bush's term. I remember. I think it was. And then recently here, the other 25-year extension was passed a few years ago. To be sure, these rights came at a great cost. But was this the best and only way for us as Black Americans to measure our progress? Look around at our communities and you be the judge. I lived in the city that I just came from. We moved from. I lived in that area of town for 20 years. And I had dedicated myself. I said, I'm going to try to do the best that I can because I got my sons that I got to raise here. So I got to use every instrument in my disposal to try to make the lives of my wife and my son and myself and those around us better. And through that time, like I said, when I came there, Clinton was in office. Then, Bush got in office. Then Obama. Then Trump. And then Biden. And before I think it was, I want to say Trump. Was it Trump? Around the time that Trump, that's when we left. Because at that time, I was like, it was getting worse. And it was like, I said, no one can say that I didn't give my all to try to make where I live, the places the sphere that I can effect change from, didn't try. But it was not the system that they had given us, which I talked about at the beginning, talking about voting. They're given us in the Black church, which we're going to talk about today, which is tied hand in hand with the voting, tied hand in hand with the Black politicians. None of it was working. None of it was working. Everything that I'm going to speak on from here on out, talking about MLK Jr., his quotes and his speeches, are my opinions from my analysis of the past, present, and future history. My personal experiences as a middle-aged Black American man, and sacred texts like the Bible and Apocrypha, I'm going to give my views on why I believe Black voting is chitterling politics, why it's worthless to us. We've been led a bowl of chitlins. In MLK's 1968 speech, The Two Nations of Black America, preceding the launch of the Poor People's Campaign, he stated voting has its place, but could not help Black people overcome the economic head start that white people had gained over us because of government policies to help them. Therefore, during that campaign, MLK said, we are coming to Washington, D.C. to get our check. MLK Jr. also stated to fellow civil rights activist Harry Belafonte, the economic problem is the most serious problem. In my opinion, MLK was coming to see that the right to vote didn't mean the right to prosper in this system that we as Black people are voting to keep status quo. That in fact, we as Black people have fallen for a Trojan horse of sort. And as MLK stated to Belafonte in another interview in 1967, less than a year before his assassination, I quote, I've come upon something that disturbs me deeply. We have fought hard and long for integration, which voting to go went along with that, because now we supposedly could vote and affect the change in their system, because they was integrating to us. Let me continue. As I believe we should have, and I know we will win, but I have come to believe that we are integrating into a burning house. I'm afraid that America has lost the moral vision she may have had. I don't want to say she never had it. And I'm afraid that even as we integrate, we are walking into a place that does not understand that this nation needs to be deeply concerned with the plight of the poor and the disenfranchised. Until we commit ourselves to ensuring that the underclass is given justice and opportunity, we will continue to perpetuate the anger and violence that tears the soul of this nation. I fear I am integrating my people into a burning house. Close quote. He said it right there. That waking up, he's seen that, and in one of his speeches, I can't remember which one, but I think he said that the dream might be becoming a nightmare. Civil rights thinkers like Cornel West have noted that his challenge to economic injustice threatened powerful interests, meaning, oh yeah, give them the right to vote. It ain't getting them access to the keys, but give them the right to vote. Continuing, potentially motivating those who wish to stop him. Before MLK's death in 1968, the powers that be had tacitly agreed in 1964 to cut up portions of the bloated swine of American economic wealth, because indeed, American wealth was a bloated swine. How was it bloated? It was bloated from unpaid slave reparations. It was bloated from land theft. It was bloated from the genocide of the indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere. It was bloated from wars. It was bloated from unfair economic policies against third world countries that profited Western industrialists. It benefited from that. But from this, supposedly, in this thing that President Lyndon B. Johnson called the so-called war on poverty. They were going to carve up parts of this bloated swine amongst poor blacks, poor whites, and other poor minorities. But still, in comparison to the spending that they were spending on the American the overall gross domestic product of the United States, the portion of that they were spending on the Department of Defense, and indeed that they were going to start spending on the Vietnam War, which started in 1965, the year I was born, it was minuscule. And even in one of King's speeches, he talked about the military industrial complex that Eisenhower had warned us, the technocrats. He warned us again about that. In my opinion, though, even with that, the portions of what they were going to give poor whites, poor blacks, and poor minorities, the portion of this bloated swine that we as black people got, I believe, was the chitlins. We were given the chitlins. And the thing about chitlins, you can get a big old plate of them. But remember what I said. It is of no nutritional value. You're not getting, for those of you that still deal with the unclean swine, you ain't getting the pork chop. You ain't getting the ham. You ain't getting the ribs. You getting the chitlins. Indeed, all of it is unclean because how this nation was built is unclean. But even with that, the pork of this unclean beast that you're going to divide amongst us is this. And indeed, when we were on the slave plantation, right, and when they cut up the pig, indeed, a lot of times, this is what we would get. We would get the chitlins, we would get the feet, we would get the snout, we would get the testicles, the hog maws, all this. Now, of course, we did what we had to do, and because we first of all, they was not allowing us to read the Bible like that to understand what we were doing. But even if we had, we were fed very infrequently. If you read the stories of a lot of slaves during the plantation, they said they were fed very few times. So they made do with what they got. But when they did seemingly give, you're going to give them the part that is of no nutrition. So this is no surprise that when they start carving this thing up called the prosperity of America, right? We got the chitlins. What are the chitlins? In my view, the chitlins are, one, the right to vote with no economic power for our overall black community. The right to vote with no economic power for our overall black community. Just like I stated to you when I was trying to push that alderman in office or whatever. And then when he got in, I said, hey, can you get these roads paved? And what I came to find out was the area where I lived at, right, they had a main street. So the word was, okay, well, we're not going to pave the secondary roads, no matter how bad it was. We got to get this main street paved. As long as we got the main street paved, all the secondary roads and all that, I don't care about that. We're going to beautify the roads leading downtown. All these little vacant lots and buildings and stuff, we ain't worrying about that. No economic power. No economic power, no economic leverage at all. I remember I even went to the mayor one time of the city because the building that I worked in, he worked there. I used to stop him all the time and tell him, was anything ever done? When those roads finally got paid, I moved away from that area over 10 some years ago. And I think it was maybe 2 years ago that someone told me that they finally paid. That would have been 25 years later after I had moved in there and all this, it was done. And I said, you know what? We had a Democratic mayor, Democratic Congress people, Democratic aldermen, all that, and nothing was being done. The right to vote with no economic power for our overall black community. Couldn't get no police cruisers to come through maybe once a month, maybe. And then even after that, it stopped. We had wild pit bulls running around. I used to call the city and say, hey, can y'all get well, we only got one animal control vehicle and, they mostly be out in the county and all this stuff. I remember one time we had these pit bulls that were running around, right? And used to, run after my kids when they used to get off the school bus. And I remember I called one time to the animal control and they said, leave a message. When they came a month later and they said, wait, I said, I called you 30 days ago. I don't see the dogs anymore. The right to vote with no economic power to change things in our black communities. 2, the right to the destruction of the black family and marriage caused by the policies of the war on poverty that prohibited black men from being in a home in order for the black woman and the child to receive the benefits. So they're saying, okay, yeah, we're gonna do a war on poverty, but for you black people, we're gonna give you the chitlins. And the chitlins is if your woman and your children getting these benefits, you cannot be in a home because you're doing too good then. You are doing too good if you got an intact family. Therefore, we're going to give you these chitlins of getting the benefits, black woman and black child, but the dad can't be in the house. The dad cannot be in the house. 3, the right to the infeminization of the black man because of the infiltration of the civil rights movement and the black church by the LGBT movement. I remember, and I never knew this much about this stuff until I guess about maybe 20 years ago when I was studying it about the speeches of Martin Luther King, the tactics, and actually maybe more than that, maybe about 25 years ago when I was studying this stuff, that his speeches were wrote for him. A lot of strategies that he got didn't come from him. That indeed, to me, the thing that was wholly controlled by black people that was the most effective that I've seen that we did was the boycott on Birmingham, where they said, okay, we won't ride the buses. And that economic boycott brought the city of Birmingham to its knees. But it was directly after that they said that when the NAACP and others got involved, they said, okay, we don't want to do the boycott part no more. Let's just do the march, right? Because the business owners, we don't want to make the business owners suffer. We don't want to alienate them from us, even though that was the most important. Because we, at that time, were not owning those kinds of businesses like that in the first place, because indeed we know what happened to our economic engines like the Black Wall Street and all these things. They had obliterated them. They had tore them down. And they left us to get the scraps off of what was left. And so what we find is that his speeches were being wrote for him, and some of the tactics, even the fact of the nonviolent thing, that although he might have been toying with the idea, King still had armed guards that was around his home. But all that was nullified when he came in and said, let's use the nonviolent tactics, and let's try to change things, not by economic boycott, but let's try to change things through voting. And Byron Ruskins was one of the primary persons that was advising him. And indeed was his speech writer at the beginning. Indeed, he was the one that wrote I Him, and his partner were the ones that crafted the I Have a Dream. I ain't said that King didn't have no input, but for the most part, they were the ones that crafted that. And in later interviews, Byron Ruskin, who was an open LGBTQ, it was known. There was no hiding of it. He said that the whole premise of him, even though he was a black man, him getting in to King and advising him was that he wanted to first access civil rights for black people, but later on he wanted to access civil rights for the LGBT community. And we can see how they have leapfrogged far above us. And we can see that when they infiltrated the civil rights, they also infiltrated the black church, because the black church was kind of going hand in hand with these things. And so we can't let a little thing of this person being like that, persuade us that maybe we want to be equated with righteousness. No, that went out the door. That went out the door. So we already see what direction that they were going to move us as black men and black women, because don't think that they were not looking at the fact that they said that even by the 1950s, statisticians knew that the population of the Caucasian people was going down, was on a downward trend because of all the wars and sickness and disease. So that they're looking at our communities and saying, look, it's so many of them. How can we stunt that growth? We can stunt it by, pushing this LGBTQ thing to them, which will stunt any children being born. The fourth one, when we talk about what the chitlins that I believe we get from black voting, we got the right to the masculinization of the black woman because of the absence of the black male in the home, and also because of the infiltration of the civil rights movement and the black church by the white feminist movement. It's not to say that black women and women indeed did not have a grievance, because we know it was not until the late 1800s, 1900s that women stopped being looked upon as being property. See, there's always a cause and an effect. And so the cause was the suffrage movement as it started out. But what might start out as a grand idea, there's going to be other forces that are going to go into that and say, no, let's push past women not being seen just as property. Let's push past women not having the right to vote. Let's push past women being able to own property and different things like that, which are good things. But let's push past them even having the need of a male and a female relationship in order to facilitate the continued growth of the nation. And that's still pushed instead for women remaining single and not producing children, because producing children is in effect them coming in cooperation with the man and bringing forth his seed, not understanding that the Bible said that the woman also had a seed too, which is her whatever. So we know that the children get the chromosomes are different from both parents. So it's not a single thing, but it is a beneficial thing for the species to continue. But let's push past that, right? Until you get to the late 50s and early 60s with the radical feminism that although black women do have grievances against the black men because, maybe, illegitimacy of children, domestic violence, all these things that were brought about by our economic and our other conditions that put upon us to cause them, so that they were ripe fruit for the white feminist movement to grab hold to them and start pushing them to say, you need to start looking at the black man not as your defender, but as your opponent. And thereby, if you're not in need of him being your protector and all that, then you can learn to subsist by yourself. And whenever women take on that persona, I'm talking about willingly. I'm not talking about those that are forced into it. But even if they are forced into it, or they taking it willingly, women have to take on somewhat an air of masculinity upon them. They have to take it upon them. There's no two ways about it. And because of the hard oppression that our women were under, but also that when somebody gave them an out, when they gave them the out, they said, we can give you this out with this and with that. We can give you the out. And you're desperate. Like we were desperate for the chitlings. We said, well, you know what, we'll take anything, even though we finding out now we don't have no economic power through voting. We have the right to vote, but we don't have the right to prosper from the voting. And when King started waking up to that, we'll see what indeed happened to him when he said in the Poor People's Campaign, when we come to Washington, we coming for a check. What happened to him when he was in the city of Memphis with the sanitation workers, who were mainly black people, to help them economically? And he started speaking out against the military-industrial complex, which was sucking all the money out of the war on poverty, or at least the choice parts for us as black people. He said, you know what? In one of his speeches, he talked about the advantage that white people had got because of the land grants. And go listen to his speech, the 1968, before, like he said, he was getting ready to launch the Poor People's Campaign. And you can start seeing that he was kind of taking on a kind of radical tone when he said, our people are behind the power curve with these people trying to tell us to pull ourselves up by the bootstrap, when they have had a 200-something year head start, and they brought people in here and taught them how to farm. They stole our land and all these things. And he was getting, but in their mind, to become radical. And they couldn't have that. They said, yeah, we'll give you the right to vote, but not the right to prosper. They killed him. They killed him. And now the infeminization of infeminization of the black man, the masculinization of the black woman, because of the absence of the black male, in order for her to get those benefits, and because the white feminist movement tell you be better off without him. Now, our women didn't take the bait right away. Our men didn't take the bait right away, because they said in the 1960s, the marriage rate between black men and black women was at 60%. By the time that you get to the 1980s, maybe less than 20 years later, it had dropped down below 30%. Number 5, the right to have crime-ridden, drug-infested communities because of the despair and continued denied opportunities brought on by high unemployment rates, drugs, and illegal guns being released onto our street, because they understood the dynamics of family, that the man not really being there to raise up the boys the right way, or to raise up the help in the raising of the girl, that you're going to get these type things. You're going to get children that's going to feel some kind of way but not having a parent. You're going to get the women feeling some kind of way of having the struggle and the strain. right? You're going to get that. You're going to get the high high unemployment rates, because if you don't have um, the the black man and the black woman coming together to build a strong home, right? You have a man moving from pillar to post, right? And a lot of times he's not just staying with one woman. He's going out and he's doing this. He's replicating this Rolling Stone mindset, as the song was in the 1970s. Papa was a Rolling Stone. He's replicating this, and therefore he's even more estranging himself from the black female, who now has to take on even more. And then what do you see? You see they switch the script. They say, okay, for black women, if you want to get out of these drug infested places, this is what you need to do. We're gonna promote in the corporate thing. We're gonna promote the black woman, right? Give you education, all these different things, and we're gonna push down the thing of trying to bring you together as one and say the black man is the ultimate problem that you have. We're gonna help you out. We're gonna help you out. We're gonna give you grants and everything to go, as for single women to go here, to go to school and different things. And indeed, like I said, it was some men that we can't totally blame everything on the programs that they instituted to task, because some men, but for those that wanted to, it makes it easier for you to take the less the path of least resistance. Okay, well, if she want to go to school and different things like that, maybe it's better that we don't come together, because if we come together, she won't be able to get the grant. She won't be able to get this. She won't be able to keep the Medicaid, because I can't get a decent job to get health coverage. It'll be better if she don't take my last name. It'll be better if I leave the house every couple of months and whatever and go look for work or whatever. But it was all messed up. The whole thing was messed up, and this brought in the crime-ridden communities of despair. Do you understand that Compton and Watts and all those places, they said coming out of World War II, these were good, what we consider to be good neighborhoods with families, people raising, community, all of that, the programs that they instituted is what brought about, even before the civil rights movement and stuff came, they were working on these theories to destroy our families. But these things brought these places to be where they, and every time they have tried to come back, the economics have been against them. Indeed, what has voting Democrat, in fact, in this whole state of California, done for the average black person? A lot of them have moved away from the state of California because the cost of living is too high for a lot of them to live there. They have left, and the ones that's left there are living on the streets. And indeed, it's coming to a neighborhood that you're in if you don't learn to turn to the Most High for your help. But the drugs, we know the drugs were being pumped into the black neighborhoods. Frank Lucas, American Gangster, bringing the heroin in. That was the whole government. I was in the military. The military is not going to be deceived of you packing drugs in the C-130 and they ain't going to know about it. They know about it. But the drugs were going to our community, so they didn't care. It's the same thing with Free Ray Ricky Ross, with the crack and the cocaine and everything. He said the government knew. They were bringing the guns. They were bringing the drugs into our street. In fact, they said that in the 1970s, and I read the article, it was a scientist that was seeing the effects of cocaine on chimpanzees. And they say he came up with a concept to crystallize the cocaine into these rocks. And they said he would get in the cages and he would smoke it with these chimpanzees. And he was studying the effects of the crack cocaine on, well, it wasn't called crack, whatever it was called. He was studying the effects of what on the chimpanzees as he got into these cages at UCLA smoking the crack with the chimpanzees. So they knew when they put the crack out, they probably taught somebody how to do it, and they said, this is what's going to happen, because they seen how the monkeys was just losing all whatever care or whatever, and how it made them, it was highly addictive. And this is what they have done to us. This is the chitlings that we got from voting. Number 6, we got the right to have a powerless and immoral black church on every street corner of the black community, holding up economic progress because it occupies most of the prime real estate and siphons off funds from its parishioners daily that could be used to create generational wealth for home ownership and land purchases without government assistance. Churches on every corner. Storefront churches, mega churches, all of this. And because indeed, what did I tell you? The civil rights movement and the church were going hand in hand. The black church we're coming together into this, and because of this deal, and especially when they gave I can't think of the thing where you don't have to pay taxes. The nonprofit thing that they gave to the churches. The churches now were becoming the quote unquote economic engines of the community, not businesses, not homes, not a man and a woman, but indeed, again, the churches had become infiltrated by feminists, but now they were black feminists. The churches became infiltrated by the LGBTQ, and that's why you see what you see now. Now, what you got to understand about infeminization of men is not always the infeminization of the, what you think with the limp wrists and all that, but infeminization is also men that are just sleeping with women with no care of taking care of women, just a whoremonger, basically. A whoremonger is an effeminized man because he's going to go from one woman to another woman, and usually he's sleeping with all these women. Usually he's going to be getting their money too. He's going to be getting their money. He's going to be laying up with them because he don't want to have nothing of his own, because he wants to move on to the next woman. So therefore, he's gone. So we've seen this infeminization of our black men in both ways, but in particularly when we talk about the black church, the infeminization of the black man, why a lot of black men left out from that is because you can see as less and less power you had as a man going into these places of churches where the pastor and maybe the deacon board, they're sharing in the wealth. Only thing you're doing is adding to it. You're saying, you know what, I'm spending Wednesday night, I could be doing overtime, I'm spending, and I know some of you that's going to say, well, you know what, seek ye first the kingdom of Yah. We made seeking the kingdom of Yah, going to the church and giving it all the money. And when some men start waking up to that, and they like, I'm done with this, right? The churches say, you know what, that's good. We got these women because all of it is tied into the government. Now the government let us be purveyor of some of these programs, and so therefore the women are survivors. They're going to say, oh, we need to go to the church. We need to bring our sons and our daughters into Sunday school, even though we know the Sunday school teacher is a little wishy-washy, even though we know some of the mothers in the church is kind of wishy-washy, and therefore these churches become purveyors. That's why it had become voting centers and all these different things, because it all got tied together and to bring us to the place that we are today, right? The best places of land and all this. Mega churches. Remember when mega churches came in? Number 7, the right to have most of the wealth of the black community focused on politicians, entertainers, professional athletes, the service industry, and drug dealers, not business owners, bankers, doctors, lawyers, accountants, airline pilots, scientists, etc. Because indeed, when we integrated, we said, well, okay, now we can go to the better funded white schools and our schools. Not all of them. Some of them are still doing good to a certain extent in certain areas. In certain areas, they might, but overall, the black people are going to the white schools. Indeed, our little stores and stuff that we had in the neighborhood, when we integrated and 7-Eleven came in, that went away. Our banks, putting your money in the black bank, now you can go to white banks. Now, all of these black banks that you see out here, all of them are really part of a bigger bank, like maybe Wells Fargo, and Wells Fargo really controls them really, and we talking about accountants. If you're gonna be an accountant as a black person, you're not gonna have no black businesses you're going to be accountant for, because you're not gonna make enough. So even if you do become accountant, you're gonna go, or airline pilot, or whatever. So most people, and it's only so many of them. So what they got us to do as black people with the voting, because we know there's a lot of entertainers, professional athletes, and others that help push the civil rights stuff, right? They said that, okay, we're gonna get them to move into mainly politics. We're gonna move them to be mainly entertainers, professional athletes, and the service industry, meaning working in fast food or hotels and all these different things, and also drug dealers. We're gonna just like American Gangster, Frank Lucas, Freeway Ricky Ross. We're gonna get them to and put their time in that, in these things that are fleeting, that are gone. And what do you see? A lot of black athletes die broke. They die broke, right? A lot of black entertainers, die broke, right? Those in the service industry, right? Unless they continue on to become regional managers and different things like that, you'll be working at Kentucky Fried Chicken for 15, 20 years, and then they might close down, and then you move on to another fast food restaurant. It's nothing. You don't get no 401k, none of that stuff. But you spend all your time in the service industry, right? And now that we see, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later, how these jobs were going to become closed to us. And we got to ask the question, have we gained anything from voting? And I would tell you, it has empowered us and given us courage to take on many issues in the black community. It had given us a voice in the sense of, hey, we have the right to vote. But they were only, and it also gave us temporary relief on the surface from the unchecked racial violence. I remember King saying something to that effect, that I might not be able to check your heart. He said, but I can slap your hand if you, with laws that'll penalize you if you try to come out and enact violence against me. So I can understand that, but at what cost? Those gains would be overshadowed by the onslaught of black male incarceration rates in the millions, because they didn't have jobs and they would go to drug dealing and all that stuff. It will be overshadowed by the destruction of black innocence because of the passing of Roe versus Wade in the 1970s. And indeed, even though we are supposed to be the smallest portion of the population, we have some of the highest rates of killing of our innocence of the people. So in fact, they got more bang for their buck by giving us the right to vote, because by giving us these rights and integrating us into this burning house, they was able to slaughter off masses of us that it might have took them decades to do. It only took maybe a few decades for them to kill tens of millions of innocents. Also religious, what else? What did we get? We got religious hypocrisy that has led to great moral degradation. It has led to great moral degradation when you have the black church that sees, okay, well, black man is not in the house, black woman mostly populating here, and now she's starting to get into feminist thought. So what ends up happening? You start placating toward that because you're saying, hey, it's not your fault that you here or whatever. It's this one's fault. And like I said, there were conditions that preceded this that definitely black women had agreements, but it was not to the extent. But once they integrated us, they pushed it to that extent so that the marriage rate went from 60% amongst black people to the low rate that it did, and therefore was a self-fulfilling prophecy where the black preacher could come in and say this, that, and other. And indeed, it moved on with the black feminist movement where they said, well, why do we even need a black man preaching to us if we majority? And then you had the rise of what? The black female pastors and preachers and priests and all these things. And indeed, you're finding this in a lot of churches, whereas before it was never like that. And indeed, if they aren't, the black men that are effeminized. They're effeminized, like people like Jamal Bryant, who was a big time effeminized man, because look at all them women and children and stuff he got. But do you see those black women trying to get him out of there? No, they don't, because he is what they want. And indeed, what some of the black leaders didn't realize until it was too late was that a great spiritual battle was being fought over our black people's souls in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. The devil knew that the time of our awakening was fast approaching, so he started muddying the waters, enticing our black leaders to sign contracts, concordats, and covenants with the principalities, powers, and rulers of the darkness of this world and spiritual wickedness in high places talked about in Ephesians 6 and 12. So the newfound rights, laws, and freedoms that were supposed to bring life to black people have actually brought death. This cannot be denied. The thing about it is our people have been warned by Father Yahuwah back in Deuteronomy 28, verses 36 to 68. 28 verses 36 to 68. However, because I believe black Americans are the descendants of the southern tribe of Judah, which is made up of the tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, it is inherent for us to gravitate toward politics or rulership, because from Benjamin and Judah came the first kings of Israel, and the Levites were the priests. Indeed, when you look at Genesis 49 and verse 10, it talks about the scepter will not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver before his feet. So it was incumbent on inherent in us to gravitate, and they placate upon that, because they had looked at that since our people had been out of, well, if you look at the word and you look at after we had got kicked out the land, but if you look in the Bible, you will see that where every kingdom that our people have been a part of, whether through enslavement or our own, we have rose to prominence. When we were in Egypt, Moses was set to be the next Pharaoh before he killed the taskmaster. If you read the book of Hebrews, the 11th chapter, 24 to 26, it clearly shows that Moses could have been the next Pharaoh if he had not decided, you know what, I want to free my people instead. right? He would have been the next Pharaoh. When we was in Babylon, we know Nebuchadnezzar set Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, as you know them, as rulers over the affairs of his kingdom. He made them. And indeed, we know that the Songhai Empire in Africa back in the 1400s, that many of their rulers were Hebrews, black people like us, remembering the words of Laban in Genesis 30 and 27, when he said that he wanted Jacob to tarry because he had learned by experience that the master or Yah blessed him for his sake. This is why they brought us to this. This is the actual reason they brought us to this nation. They brought us to this Western Hemisphere, and indeed the United States, to help build it up and to sustain the empire. They have used crafty counsel. When they got to the 1960s, they knew that we was becoming discontented. So what did they do? They said, in order to get these black people to be content, let's use crafty counsel against them and tell them, we're going to give you the right to vote. We're going to, finally, we ain't going to give the poll tax no more. We ain't going to make you take no tests. We ain't going to do that. We're going to move out of the way and let you participate in this American thing and give you a slice of this swine, which is an unclean beast. But overall, that agenda, right, moved us further and further away from Yah and further away even from the power. We will give you position, but we will not give you no power to change the course of your community. We will put you in power in NASA so your black women can be the human computers that helped us get to the moon. But we would not help you populate your communities with black businesses. We would put your generals like Colin Powell and others in positions of power to help us fight against the Viet Cong, and for him to be part of the Iran-Contra scandal that helped bring in weapons to the Contras illegally, sliding past Congress, and also at the same time bringing drugs through Free Ray Ricky Ross into the black communities through the Colombians and all those that were moving the weapons into Nicaragua, into our things. This is what you're going to get. You're going to use Colin Powell to help do the first war to Iraq, get us into that war with Iraq. When Iraq was going into Kuwait, they said that they were just trying to get back some oil fields that had belonged to them, and then America told them it's okay. And indeed, we find out all the stuff that they was talking about, the Iraqi soldiers unplugging the incubators out of the babies in Kuwait City, was a lie. It was all made up to get us into that war. Colin Powell, who led as Schwarzkopf, but Colin Powell was the overall leader of it. They used us, right? They put us in the positions of power, but did not let us get overall. Who brought us into the second war, the war in Iraq? It was Colin Powell doing what? Going to the UN, him and Condoleezza Rice. Very high positions, but they used us to get into an illegal war that was propagated on a lie of weapon mass destruction. So again, yeah, you got the people in a position, you got the politicians and all these, but they're not pushing anything that's going to help black people, but continue this thing of the American experiment. And therefore you say, we got to do it. We got to keep voting, even though we see what it's doing to our community. We were fed chitlins. And indeed, in Yeshua's parable of the two sons in Luke 15, verses 11 through 24, you see in verse 15 where the Bible said he joined the younger son. So it was the younger son that went off into the far country and wasted his substance on riotous living, and he got so desperate that he had to join himself. He had to join himself. He had to join himself to what? A citizen of that country in order for him to survive. And he said he sent him to do what? Feed his swine. When we integrated in, they said, okay, we're going to give you something, but we're going to give you the intestines of the swine. And it said that in verse 16, he said, when the young man looked at the pigs feeding on the husk, he said his stomach was so empty that he thought, you know what, man, let me eat some of these husks with the swine, right? But then he thought, he said, you know what, I come from better than this. Why am I going to eat off the husk of these pigs when I know if I go home to my father, man, he got way better than this for me. If I just go back as a servant, why do I perish here with hunger? I'm telling you, it's time for us to go back to our Father. It's time for us to go back to the ways of Yah amongst our people. We got to go back. That's the only way. Voting is not going to do it. Black Republicans, voting is not going to. Do you remember Black Republicans? The compromise of 1877, or the corrupt bargain, where the Republicans wanted to get their the presidential candidate, Rutherford Hayes, in, but the Democrats were ready for the military to leave the South so that they could get their hands back on the land and the people again. And so the Republicans made a deal with the Democrats in the South in order to pull back the powers that they had. And we know that they said that they told them, you got to pull the troops out of South Carolina, you got to pull the troops out of Florida, you got to pull the troops out of Louisiana. And they say, okay, we'll do that if you go to the Electoral College and get them to put Rutherford Hayes in, even if he don't have the popular vote, which indeed we see this done all the time, that they'll say, we know this person has a popular vote, but the electoral, well, it was called Electoral Commission back then. We call it Electoral College, the same thing. But they say the electors don't want this person. Do you remember that? Do you remember Al Gore? Do you remember this? So again, what do they keep telling us? It's chitlins. And remember Black Republicans, that they said as soon as they pulled the troops out, the white Republicans left the South and gave it over to the Democrats. And indeed, you lost the control once those state governments took back control. Do you remember Black Republicans? Do you remember how they portrayed you in the 1970s. The 1960s, where they when Kennedy voted, well, not Kennedy, yeah, when Kennedy was trying to get the votes of Black people by calling Coretta Scott King and calling the judge to get King out, and Black people moved over from the Democrat Party, from the Republican Party into the Democrat Party, because indeed the Republican Party was being filled with Dixiecrats that had got mad at President Truman in the 1940s and 50s for the stuff that he had done for Black people. They started moving in, and then after that, they just flooded the Republican Party. Remember how they portrayed you, and indeed Black people switched over to the Democrat Party because of that. Remember how they did that? Remember what they did to Armstrong Williams and many others that they got to go out and promote policies and different things that were wrong, like the leave no child behind, and they found out that he had took money to promote it, and then when they found out, the Republicans cut him loose, and his political aspirations, that if he had any, were gone. And now you might hear Armstrong Williams every now and then, but they cut him loose. But they got him to push this no child left behind thing, that whatever was left of the schools was destroyed by that. But they got him to promote that, right? Remember Richard Nixon with his war on drugs that he started in the 1970s, and then Reagan that picked it up. What they did, black Republicans, remember what they did to black communities with the CIA bringing the drugs and the guns in. You remember what Ronald Reagan did with the Amnesty Act in 1986, where he gave a pathway to citizenship to over 3 million people that were here in America illegally, which was the beginning of the downfall of black businesses and that were left and anything, because these people come in and do it for cheaper. Indeed, you used to see, and I ain't saying it was a good thing always, but even on the farming and stuff, I remember picking tobacco and stuff like that in the 80s, but eventually all that stuff was taken over by the illegal immigrants. Even though I wasn't getting paid that much for it, this is when I was in high school, little bit I got was something, but they came in and picked it for cheaper. Now, do I blame them? No, I'm not blaming them, but I'm saying this was the Republican Party that did all this to that you were standing up for. So I'm telling you, voting Republican is a smokescreen. You vote for this Donald Trump guy is a smokescreen, right? That guy does not have your best interests at heart. He does not have your best interests at heart. But you vote for who you want to. You do what you think is right. But I'm just letting you see history. Black Democrats, remember that the only reason, again, that you are a Democrat is because the Republican Party betrayed you when it came to King. And then that one phone call by Kennedy to Coretta Scott in 1960, and for the judge to let King out of that Birmingham jail, and King's father, MLK Sr., telling you, hey, give your vote, even though I was supporting Nixon, I'm going to switch to Kennedy. This is how you got in the Democratic Party. It wasn't because, you studied it far and wide and say, hey, this is the best move. You got there because you seen that the Republicans, hey, they're not going to lift a finger to help you, so let's flee here. So when you in desperation, you flee to somebody for help. You got to take whatever help they give you. And that's what they have basically been telling you. You came to us. You came to the Democratic Party for help. We didn't ask for you. You came because the Republicans wasn't doing right to you. So therefore, we're going to help you. But the help that we get, don't be complaining about it. Remember, when the Voters' Rights Act and all that got passed, what did America immediately do? They started a war in Vietnam under the false pretenses of the Gulf of Tonkin. Therefore, all that money that should have been coming to help build up it was going now to even more to the military-industrial complex. And also they were saying, we're going to put your men on the front line. This is the Democratic policies that did this. And indeed, all the policies that the Democratic Party signed into law under Lyndon B. Johnson eventually got sliced up amongst other minorities, where you was not going to be getting a lion's share of them. And indeed, we found out that welfare was later on being used by more white people than us. And indeed, again, they was putting a stipulation on us that the black man could not be in the home. This was all Democratic policy that you voted for. Remember Bill Clinton in the 1994 crime bill that him and Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton pushed, that just as some black men like myself in the 80s was trying to get themselves together, they said, oh no, oh no, you smoking some weed, you get caught with weed, you got 3 strikes, or we're gonna start slamming you. But we putting the crack out that we invented in the 1970s out. And because we promoting what? We promoting black politicians, we promoting black entertainers, we promoting drug dealers with the movie, with all these movies, Scarface, who is still a hero in black communities. We promoting this thing with Nino Brown. We promoting this, and therefore we promoting it. When you sign up for it, we're gonna put you in jail with the '94 crime bill, with the man that black people call the first black president, Bill Clinton, and who later on Joe Biden, who pushed it. We let him help him get in office. Why? Because we got the scepter. Whoever we speak, it's not our numbers. It's because it's a spiritual principle. Wherever we have gone and we attach ourselves to them, they brought up, not because these people are good, but because they have us in tow. Remember Bill Clinton, 1996 welfare reform, which pretty much now even made things even harder, not just for the black man, but even the black woman. They was like, we cutting this stuff out, and things gonna be harder for you now. Remember what Bill Clinton did with the black Haitian farmers? He destroyed their rice. Then remember his African policies. I was in the army at the time in Somalia, the stuff that he did in Africa, because he didn't want to get mixed up in it to help them. So he allowed that mission to go awry so that they could say, we don't want another Black Hawk Down. I was in that. He said, and the stuff that they had us doing didn't make any sense, but they didn't want the mission to succeed, because then if it would succeed, then more black people would say, you need to help Africa out more. But he could always point back and say, I don't want another Black Hawk Down. And because of that, you had the genocide in Rwanda, where over 1 million some people died, many of them who were Hebrews like us, that were hacked to death by blades, that the Clinton administration wouldn't do nothing to stop. This was all that you voted for. Remember Obama's support for not criminalizing the banks that with the subprime mortgage thing that caused a lot of black people to lose their homes, which, by the way, the subprime lending was being pushed by the Democrats as home ownership for black people that was complaining in the 70s and 80s that we were not getting homes. So I said, okay, we're going to get these banks to create these shady subprime mortgages that we're going to push you in, and we're going to push the banks to get you in. And so that when 2008 came along, when it all failed, it was mostly black people that lost a lot. Well, I ain't going to say mostly, but a majority of black home ownership in America was lost. Why do you think there's so many homeless people all around the country that are black, and especially in California? Because of subprime mortgages that were pushed by the Democrats in the 70s and 80s. Say, you want home ownership? Instead of us getting rid of redlining and all these different things, we're going to put the subprime mortgage and stuff. Remember what Biden, when he was in office, said he gonna have your back. But then when he got in office, he didn't speak to the black organizations till a couple of months later. And then when he did, he told them, look, time out for you. It's time for us to focus on the Hispanics. And I got to give it to the Hispanics. They are what's wiser than us, and they're gonna come out of this whole thing, no matter who gets in office, better than us. That's just a point of fact, because they are smarter than us. And indeed, like I said in one of my sermons before, a lot of this land, because they are the indigenous people, a lot of this is theirs. And so it's coming back to them. So we can't get mad at them for wanting to benefit on it. They are smarter than us. I've voted actively. I've done everything that people are out here crying and texting you and putting all this literature in your mailbox telling you, if you don't do this, then some kind of policy or thing they talking about. I'm like, We ain't gotta wait for that policy to come. The policy that we have been is effective right now in downplaying us because we don't worship Yah. We don't live the right way. This is why this stuff with Diddy is coming out. Yah is trying to show us, I will not be mocked what a man sow if he gonna reap. And that's why these black churches, the black politicians, all of them, he letting you parade all out because we going down. If we don't turn back to Yah, and indeed those immigrants, no matter who gets in office, we are not going to prosper until we turn back to Yah. We must turn back to Him and push away this plate of chitlins that they're giving us right now. And I'm getting ready to end. I'm telling you what the play is, because this is my belief. This is just my belief. I believe that Kamala Harris is going to win the election. No doubt about it. Because the globalists first, they don't want Trump because they got to move on to the next global agenda, which is the technocracy is coming to play. Technology is coming to take over everything, because now they don't need nobody. They don't need black or white or whatever, but indeed they need the power and the economics of America and the West to push this thing to where now everything, AI is running a lot of stuff. So they don't need nobody smart that's in the White House, either Democrat or Republican, because a lot of it is being run by, programmers right now. It is. But the reason I believe she's gonna win, because that just say that you say you as black people, right? I'm not gonna vote for Trump. I'm not gonna vote for Kamala. I'm gonna vote for Jill Stein. Well, they're gonna get you on that because they're already trying to get Jill Stein in the Green Party, trying to push her to give her docket. Basically the same thing they did with Bernie Sanders with Hillary Clinton, where they kind of forced, him and some of his people balked, but a lot of them went over to Hillary Clinton. But I think that's gonna probably happen right there, definitely, or whatever. And just the fact that I said I believe that it's probably gonna be white women and others is gonna probably vote against Trump, because, like I said, they want this thing to go forward, and he would be an impediment. So that's I could be wrong, but even if he gets in, he's not going to stop what's going forward for us as black people, indeed the world. The time of the beast system is almost to be, it's already in play, but it's almost ready to just take over completely, because AI is moving at an exponential rate, and it's moving stuff around right now as we speak. And if you don't turn to the Most High Yah, it doesn't matter who's in office. But indeed, I believe that Kamala is gonna be, and it's not gonna be good for us either way, right? No matter what, we got to turn to Yah. That is our salvation. So with that, I'm going to ask you to, if you vote, I had to come to this understanding from my things that happened to me, and maybe not this time, but maybe next time you might see just like me. So I don't have a knock against you if you vote, but I'm just letting you know that it's chitlins. It's chitlins for us as black people. That's what we've been getting, and we're gonna get even less of that now. And it's just the truth. If you don't turn to the Most High Yah, indeed, when I start waking up from a lot of this stuff, then I start seeing things better for me and my family. When I start saying, I need to make this move. I need to get enough where I can move my family to a place with a better situation, with the roads paved and all that stuff, instead of sitting here like the four lepers in the Old Testament. He said, why sit we here until we die? The Syrians out there, right? If we go to them, right? They got food, but at least, we die or whatever. I'm not saying that we need to sell out to either party. We don't need to. I'm talking about the better way is to acknowledge the Most High Yah in all your ways, and he will direct your path in the right way and stop going down the path of the black Republicans and the black Democrats, because it's not working for us. So with that, I'm going to ask you to give this video a thumbs up. I'm going to ask you to subscribe. I'm going to ask you to share this video. I'm going to ask you to be blessed. Shalom.